Alright, so we've gotten up to the point that we started this story like 4 billion years and 13 books ago. That's finally where we've gotten to. Well, we're not quite up to date because there's still the whole 10 years that Odysseus spends on the island banging this shit out of Calypso. But Odysseus thankfully skips over that because at this point in the book I think he realizes that we're tired of hearing about his fucking sex life. So all of the Phaeacians are like, oh dude, nice story, that only took like 11 billion years. But you could totally stay here. And the king is like, you can also bang my daughter. And Odysseus is like, thank you. And then in the morning, you can get on this ship that we're going to outfit for you with like a whole bunch of gifts and a whole bunch of food and shit. And we'll drive you back home. And Odysseus is like, fucking finally. Alright. So in the morning, they all get on the boat. And they put all the gifts for Odysseus on there. And they're sailing back to Ithaca. And Poseidon rolls by on his way back from, like, Ethiopia or some shit. And he's like, oh no! More people being nice to Odysseus! It's almost as if he's a nice guy deserving of rewards somehow. No! So, he waits for them to get Odysseus off the boat. By the way, Odysseus totally conks out for the entire boat ride there. Like, conks out so hard that they arrive and they're like, hey Odysseus, we're here, wake up. And Odysseus is like... So they pick him up, and they take him off the boat, and they drop him on the land, surrounded by all of the gifts that they got for him, and leave before he wakes up. And so they're sailing back home, sailing back home, sailing back home. And they get into their harbor, and Poseidon is like... And their boat turns to stone, and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And all of the Phaeacians that are on land are like, holy goat balls, we fucked with Poseidon. Guess we shouldn't have given a ride to Odysseus. Okay, new policy. From now on, we do not help charismatic wayward travelers. Yet another way that Odysseus made the world better. Anyway, he's finally back in Ithaca, and he wakes up on this shoreline in the fog, and Athena is there, and Athena is like, Odysseus, Odysseus, all of these suitors are hanging out trying to touch your wife's vag, but don't go there yet. Go to this dude Eumaeus and talk to him for a while. Eumaeus is Odysseus' swineherd, who is like the son of a noble that they adopted at one point. So Odysseus goes to see Eumaeus, but he's Odysseus, right? He can't just go to see Eumaeus. He has to go to see Eumaeus dressed as a beggar to test Eumaeus' hospitality. So he goes to Eumaeus and he's like, I'm a beggar, can I sleep here? And Eumaeus is like, yeah, sure, dude. And Odysseus is like, nice. And they start drinking some wine, and Odysseus is like, hey, man, I'll totally leave tomorrow. I don't want to be a strain on you. And Eumaeus is like, no, dude, stay as long as you like. And Odysseus is like, second test, you passed. But I'm still not going to tell you who I am. So they hang out for a while longer. Meanwhile, Athena shoots over to Telemachus and is like, Telemachus, all of the suitors are going to totally kill the shit out of you when you land. They've been planning to ambush you since book 2. And Telemachus is like, oh shit, well, can you tell me how to avoid that? And Athena's like, I can totally tell you how to avoid that. And Telemachus is like, sweet, tell me how to avoid that. And Athena tells him how to avoid that. And then she's like, after you avoid that, go to see this swineherd Eumaeus. For some reason. Telemachus is like, sure, alright, I'm already doing everything else you say. So he sails back, and he avoids the shit out of the suitors, and he goes to see Eumaeus. And Eumaeus is already hosting this beggar man, who nobody knows is Odysseus. And Odysseus sees his son, he's like, oh, nice, my son's here too! All the dominoes are falling into place. So he's like, hey, Eumaeus, can you leave for a second so I can talk to this guy who may or may not be my son? And Eumaeus leaves, and then Odysseus leaves, and then when he comes back in, he looks like Odysseus. And he's like glowing with divine light and shit. And so his son is like, hey, Dad. And Odysseus is like, hey, I was stuck on an island for a while. What the fuck were you doing? And Telemachus is like, oh, actually, I knew about that. And Odysseus is like, well, then why didn't you come get me? And Telemachus is like, ah. So then they hug and they cry and shit, and then they're like, okay, now we gotta kill the shit out of all of the suitors who have been trying to touch my wife/mom's vag all this time. And so they come up with a really clever plan, which I'll tell you later. So then they next day, along with Eumaeus, because Eumaeus is gonna help them with this, they go to the palace. And Telemachus comes back, and the suitors are all like, oh, hey, Telemachus, good to have you back. We totally didn't try and kill you or anything. Nice. And then they're like, who the fuck is this beggar? And the beggar's like, I'm a beggar. But he's actually Odysseus. But he's like, I'm a beggar. And they're like, fuck you, beggar. And they like kick him and they insult him and shit. And basically, they just have a miserable time making Odysseus more and more pissed off. And then it's time for them to sleep. And Odysseus is like, I want to sleep here. And the suitor's like, no, you fucking can't sleep here. And Penelope's like, you totally can sleep here. And actually, this is my house. So you can do that. So Odysseus gets ready to bed down. And what happens next will be the concluding chapter of our story.